Another show, do you even call it defection? Another headline for Gamecock basketball that did not include something positive. Another guy exiting the program. It happened not too long after yesterday's program, I guess, Bill, but the first time we can talk about it at length here. Rakim Felder will not be back for, I guess, what would have been his redshirt sophomore season if you missed last year because of an indefinite suspension. Was back in the second semester on the bench and practicing with the team, had a set of certain criteria he needed to meet to get back to the team, did not meet that, and now he's one of those guys that just jumped in and was almost an instant fan favorite. I feel like a little undersized but tough, good shooter, brought a lot to a really good team, and was a really big piece. I mean, you score 15 points against Duke in the second round of an NCAA tournament game, one of the biggest wins in school history. That'll help your popularity real quick. But he's a guy that will not ever wear the Gamecock uniform again, and I think a lot of people obviously disappointed about that yesterday.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate. And, Frank Martin really went out of his way to try and help Rakim Felder. And, again, kind of like P.J. Dozier, nobody wins in this situation. Rakim Felder doesn't win. South Carolina basketball doesn't win. Frank Martin doesn't win. There's no winners in a situation like this, and it's a shame, though, that you had a coach and a university that tried to do as much as they could for this young man, and for whatever reason, he just couldn't get it together, couldn't find whatever he had to find or do whatever he needed to do to make himself a path here at the University of South Carolina. And you hope that wherever he ends up, wherever he goes, he'll kind of pull it together and go on to a productive career and more after that. But certainly kind of I don't know if it's a blow or not to the University of South Carolina. We'll find out. We'll find out at the end of next year when we learn more about TJ Moss and certainly what could happen down the line with South Carolina now. As I imagine they'll hit the grad transfer market for a point guard recruit, or they'll try and look for maybe a Courtney Ramey out of St. Louis. It'll be kind of interesting to see how they go about trying to replace that particular scholarship. But no real winners in this, and it's a shame that when you're given so many opportunities, so many chances, when a university and your head coach sticks up for you, you can't take advantage of it.
Yeah, I think now it's obvious from a basketball standpoint, not good news for Carolina. You could have gotten some experience, depth, and a guy that is really a dynamic player, a really good shooter, and the leadership standpoint, I think maybe his void felt there more than anything last year. Obviously, you needed his play on the court. You could have used him to defend and to shoot the three, but more of the tough-mindedness. I think Frank Martin brought that up several times during the season, how his team was lacking that, especially consistently, and the voices at practice just weren't there. He was used to having them and having the experienced leadership before in Sindarius Thornwell and P.J. Dozier, and I think Felder fell in that mold and was going to be the next guy to kind of carry that on just naturally. And Martin talks about it all the time, how you can't really develop leaders artificially from a coaching standpoint. Those guys have to do it on their own, and he seemed to be one of those guys naturally. Even when he returned to the team, it was just practicing. He was there at home games and was clearly a strong voice. And to lose that part of things, I think, probably hurts as much as anything from a program standpoint that has seen certainly more than its fair share of turnover here recently. Felder now the 13th guy to exit the program just here in the last 2 years.
Yeah, what'll hurt, obviously, like he says, the leadership, because Chris Silva will be back or should be back. It would be a shock if he wasn't. But Silva's not the vocal leader, kind of the emotional leader. I think he's tried. We saw that at times this past year. But you're right, there's a different leadership capability, a quality of a point guard, and that's something that Rakim Felder brought to the table. And we'll see where they go about. Maybe it's Justin Minaya stepping up as a sophomore, maybe it's somebody else, but certainly at this point in time, that's going to be a big question mark. To me, next season will be we'll know about next season here within the next 45 days, 50 days, as we get resolution on the Brian Bowen situation. Even without
less than that, May 30th, the date for underclassmen to declare that they're going to come back, right? And we're sitting here with 6-7 days left at the end of April. So it's more like 7 weeks, I think. About 35 days, we'll figure that situation out. So the worst-case scenario, I think, for Gamecock fans, if they wanted to spiral yesterday, is Well, obviously Felder's not coming back, and you got two other guys who have declared for the NBA draft at this point, in Chris Silva and Brian Bowen. It is, I guess, somewhat realistic. It's theoretically possible, I should say, that they're not going to come back. Well, if those guys don't come back, then who the heck is coming back for Gamecock basketball kind of thing?
Yeah, I think they have until June 11th. I'm with you. I keep hearing May 30th, and I'm not sure why. This is off of USA Today. It says the deadline for college players to enter the draft is April 22nd. Players have until June 11th to remove themselves from the draft process. I'm with you. I've kept hearing May 30th, but I had also been seeing June 11th, so I don't know if I'm misreading something, if there's something to go with that. But this is out of the USA Today article on college basketball underclassmen entering NBA draft process. It says the deadline for college players to enter the draft is April 22nd. Players have until June 11th to remove themselves from the draft process. I don't know if that I'm not sure exactly where but because I've heard the May 30th date as well as you have, but I've also seen the June 11th. That caused me to look it up very quickly. We'll see. Either way, the bottom line with this is that Chris Silva and Brian Bowen, that's who you turn your attention to. T.J. Moss and Jermaine Cousinard, certainly the two guards right now that South Carolina has committed and signed, and we'll see how good or what they can produce next year. Justin Minaya will be counted on heavily. And again, I don't think that South Carolina's done with the recruiting process. In Frank Martin's defense, he's been able at times to go out and find some really good players late in the process. Michael Carrera and Justin Minaya appear to be two guys that were brought in very, very late in the process, and I think most people would be very happy with another Michael Carrera, and Justin Minaya looks like a guy who could be a large piece of this program for the next 3 years.
Night of celebration overall for Gamecock Athletics last night. They had the Gamecock Gala at the Colonial Life Arena. Some MVPs named of teams. No surprise, Chris Silva, the MVP of the basketball team. Asia Wilson, the female athlete of the year on that side of things. I was a bit surprised that just in the middle of that freshman season where he comes in, Jake Bentley, a co-MVP in his freshman season, but not at all in his sophomore season. Sky Moore, the football MVP, named last night at the Gamecock Gala. Who do you think we're going to hear first? We're going to hear a quarterback's name first. We're going to hear Saquon Barkley. How's this thing going to go down?
It's a great question. What I wanted to say was Saquon Barkley because I feel like that's the safest pick.
Agreed.
But I don't feel like that's going to be the pick. It's the Browns. We're going to hear a defensive back, they got 2 picks in the top 4. You're going to hear something that, they got to replace Joe Thomas. Who knows? It's one of those things that with the Browns, I am not a proponent of taking unless it's Peyton Manning, unless it is a bona fide, just can't miss prospect. And I get it that it's hard to tell who those, like Aaron Rodgers dropping to 22nd, I believe, or 23rd, whatever he dropped to. I get it that it's hard to figure out who a can't miss prospect is, but I would not take a quarterback at 1. If I was ever a GM, I really probably wouldn't take a quarterback in the top 5, again, unless I felt it was just an absolute no-brainer. And for Sam Darnold, for Josh Rosen, for Josh Allen, even a Baker Mayfield, who I've seen people now talking about getting into the top 3 and going to New York, I wouldn't take any of those guys. To me, the safest pick the safest pick at the top of this draft, and I think that to me is when you start talking about trying to do. If you're trying to do your mock draft or your whatever, however you want to do it, you got to take the safest guy. Who do I look at and is going to give me the most Pro Bowls? And Saquon Barkley is up there at the top of people that both fit what the Browns need and will give them the most Pro Bowls.
Okay, I can see that. But I think recent history is actually pretty good for the NFL when you're talking about quarterback prospects anyway. Jared Goff, number 1 overall. Mm-hmm. I'd say maybe even less than a Josh Rosen type career. I'm trying to compare him to one of the quarterbacks this year. And then I continue to go back. Carson Wentz, obviously, doing it on a different level at North Dakota State, I believe it is. Really, really good pick, right? Those were top 2 picks, a couple of years ago, couple of years ago now. Obviously have turned out to be really good players, and through the process, however the NFL did it, they got that right. The interesting part to me is the Deshaun Watson deal. how impressive he was last year as a rookie. Clearly a difference maker, clearly a franchise guy, and yet he slid down a little bit. Obviously, the Texans thought he was very valuable and jumped up to get him. Pat Mahomes, I think the jury's still out, but clearly the Kansas City Chiefs really valued the former Texas Tech quarterback enough to get rid of Alex Smith this offseason.
Well, let me go back and say that, because I think, again, I'll always say this with the NFL. It's also based on the franchise that you're going to. If it was the New England Patriots, and I'm not talking about the bad New England Patriots, but if somehow in some way New England Patriots had the number one pick in the draft, I'd say, yeah, you take a quarterback. I have faith in them developing a quarterback. One, because you're not having to put him right out there. I mean, even Jared Goff, perfect example. Jared Goff basically had a redshirt year, right, in Los Angeles. He didn't. 10
games, I think he basically watched.
10. I thought it might have been 12. But either way, I mean, he was not thrown into the fire. Carson Wentz, to a lesser extent, kind of the same. He got thrown into the fire much quicker, but still it wasn't right off the bat. You look at an organization like the Browns, who have so many needs. I'll be honest. Again, if I'm the Browns, and this isn't ideal for the number one pick, they've got 2 in the top 4. I would take Barkley at running back, and I'd go Bradley Chubb and pair him with Myles Garrett at the defensive line. Your defensive line is where you're going to win. Love this draft talk, by the way. Glad we finally got into this. I would have Bradley Chubb and Myles Garrett.
That defensive line is where you're going to win.
That's where you win, Tim. Everybody knows this. You win championships on the defensive line.
That's why.
Did you see what the Eagles did this year? Brady's got the ball. He's about to drive down the field. He's going to go down and score. The Patriots are going to be Super Bowl champs again. You know what made the play? What position? Defensive line.
Name 2 Patriots defensive linemen.
In recent years or now? Vince Wilfork?
And?
Oh, just name there's a million of them. I mean,
there's a million of them.
Just because I'm not up on my Patriots defensive linemen. Look, you're telling me the defensive line doesn't win you championships?
Yes, that's
what did the Giants do that year they beat the Patriots with all those defensive linemen?
They had Eli Manning throwing to Plaxico Burress,
limited them to 14 points in that Super Bowl.
The ridiculous David Tyree catch from Manning. You don't remember that?
Wouldn't be in that position if it wasn't for the defensive line.
Right. You even going to give me Jason Pierre-Paul? You can give me a name besides him?
Strahan.
And
what was the other guy? Osman Noura. I'm not pronouncing that correctly. It doesn't matter. The guy was really good. That's all that mattered. He made a name for himself. I would pair as if I'm the Browns. I'd take Barkley at 1. I feel like that is the most surefire pick. Now the problem with that is you still don't have a quarterback, but I would pair him. You can get one later on. You can get one later on in the draft. You can find a guy later in the draft that you feel comfortable with, and then kind of work your way down. But to me, the Browns will take a quarterback. They'll probably take Josh Allen, and we'll never hear from Josh Allen again. He'll just be another in a long line of Browns quarterbacks that didn't work out.
Well, there's no doubt that Cleveland hasn't developed a quarterback. The interesting part to me is the different paths these guys have taken, these top quarterback names, talking about Sam Darnold from Southern Cal, Baker Mayfield, Josh Allen at Wyoming, Josh Rosen, UCLA, Lamar Jackson, throw him in there as well, having the most productive college career of those guys. And now how they're evaluated as far as their pro potential, right? Look, we barely hear about Lamar Jackson in this whole process. He was clearly the most dynamic player. I think he even ended up better stats this year than he had his Heisman year. But we had all seen it before, and Louisville didn't win enough for him to win a Heisman Trophy. Baker Mayfield in Oklahoma did, and he took over that, except now the knock on him is that he's not a prototypical NFL quarterback like a guy like Josh Allen from Wyoming. I think what Carson Wentz has done recently, coming from a smaller school, I mean, that's been the narrative here recently in the NFL. The better quarterbacks have come from smaller programs for whatever reasons, right? The motivation, you can say they were overlooked. You got even the Tom Brady. I know he went to Michigan, but the fact that he was drafted behind however many quarterbacks it is, 7 or 8 or something ridiculous, and he's always had that chip on his shoulder. Or you can go with the fact that they just didn't have as good receivers in college. Like, I think that's been the knock against SEC quarterbacks. Steven Garcia, what would he do if he got in trouble at South Carolina? Just throw it up to Alshon Jeffrey, right? If you go to Eastern Illinois, like Tony Romo or whatever it was, you don't have those options, and you have to develop your skill set that much more. I think that has gone into it here recently, but there are still a bunch of NFL quarterbacks that went to big boy college programs and had solid receivers, maybe just not a ridiculously talented guy like Alshon Jeffrey, Julio Jones, we can go down the list. Who do you take? Who is your one quarterback out of this draft class who you feel most confident about moving forward is my question to you. Because they all have, you can nitpick all of them, right? You can nitpick everybody. I think Sam Darnold might be the most solid guy. I think he might be the most highly thought of at this point. The Josh Allen is more of a wild card because you didn't really see him play in college, right? And even his numbers last year at Wyoming, not that impressive. And then you got Josh Rosen as a bit of I think he's the biggest gamble at this point because of some of the off the field stuff that's popped up. His ability to be very outspoken and go against the grain and the questions about how important is football to you. I know you gave me the look there. I guess Baker Mayfield's probably the biggest wild card. No, because you
said the questions off the field. I honestly, but again, it's the franchise that drafts a player. You know, if we're talking about different, to me, it comes down to what franchises are drafting what players and how they can develop them.
But look, like the Atlanta Falcons didn't have any kind of track record of developing quarterbacks, but Matt Ryan has been fantastic.
It doesn't really have to do with the track record of developing quarterbacks. It's a track record of how you handle your players and develop your players across the board, not just that. I mean, does anybody feel like if Tom Brady had gone to the Patriots have always been a fairly well-run organization. I wouldn't ever consider them a clown organization, right? I mean,
when Pete Carroll was there, I think we would have a different conversation.
A clown organization, like think about the way that the Raiders were being run in the last decade. I mean, the Browns for the longest time, we'd probably say the Jaguars. You know, and what was being said of Blake Bortles going really even at the end of the year, Clowney saying he was a trash quarterback. I mean. You know, but to me, it comes down to who drafts you and how their organization is set up for you to succeed. Josh Rosen, if I was the Giants, that would probably be the guy. Again, the Browns are going to take somebody, and they're probably going to take Josh Allen. But I don't feel like those are set up to succeed. I feel like the Giants may be a little bit more set up to succeed, and if they're going to take a replacement for Eli Manning, I'd probably go Josh Rosen.
But overall, you got the number one pick, or you have your choice of quarterbacks. Rosen's your guy.
Yeah.
Why?
I think he's more of the prototypical NFL quarterback, and I also like the fact that he's a little cerebral, to me, more cerebral than Darnold or Allen. I like that he's willing to go against the grain. You look at his highlights at UCLA, and when he was on the majority of the time. I mean, he was a fantastic quarterback. I don't know, really, it's hard to gauge with UCLA whether they were underachieving with talent with Jim Mora Jr. or whether we overrated UCLA. But you look at when Josh Allen was playing, I mean, that young man was very, very good. And Sam Darnold, I don't know if he lived up to the hype last year that necessarily we thought he would end up being. Maybe again, too much hype, too much pressure on him. Sam Darnold, I think, is a byproduct of the last half of 2016, and then an incredible Rose Bowl game. And Josh Allen, I watched him at the very beginning of the year. They played Iowa, and so that kind of left a stain on my impression of him. He was awful in that game. I think they lost that game 21-3 or something along those lines, and just wasn't impressed with him. And so that was the one time I saw Josh Allen and kind of walked away from that going, okay, you play an Iowa defense that's slightly above average, and you really struggle. It's hard for me to believe you're the top flight quarterback that everybody's trying to tell me you are. You know, I'm not crazy about him, but Baker Mayfield is a guy that I think the comparisons to Johnny Manziel are unfair. I think Baker Mayfield's a guy who could go into the NFL and have a pretty good career because he seems to have kind of the ability to rally a locker room. He does seem to just make plays. I think Baker Mayfield could end up being the guy that, once again, we'll go back and look at in years to come and say, oh, man, how did they kind of miss him? Because they looked at him and they said, oh, well, he's only 6 feet tall. Well, he only does this. He can barely throw the ball too often. It's kind of like with Deshaun Watson last year as it was leading up to the draft. Well, he's not physical enough. He doesn't do this enough. He only makes one read in the Clemson system, and so all of a sudden you got him dropping outside the top 10.
Such a fun job. We get to come in here and make fun of each other and talk about basically the toy department of life in sports, right, Jen?
The toy department of life.
I mean,
or in sports.
It's nothing to take so seriously, right?
No, not at all. Mm-mm.
And yet, I am now surrounded by not one, but two guys furiously looking at research on the internet and writing stuff down.
They really are.
This
it
is
looks like
what
a classroom.
This is what the NFL draft does to people. It takes sports and sucks all the life and fun out of it and makes it a spreadsheet. That's what these guys are doing right now. Bill Gunter right now furiously writing, the intern Jordan as well. They're conferring now on tablets, the whole thing.
Wow.
Oh, Jordan
think
found
tank.
exactly what I was already writing down.
Guys, you're going at this at a very bracketology type level. Joe Lunardi is the only guy who's proud of you right now.
No.
What point are you trying to prove?
I mean,
unprovable point are you trying to prove?
Quarterbacks are a bad investment in the first 15 picks. They're a bad investment.
And Jordan shakes his head. So this is the classic nerd war you guys are already into. I feel like I'm in the middle of Dungeons and Dragons, you've made it football.
Look, I realize having fun is a foreign concept to you. And enjoying, this, it's the NFL draft, Tim.
Uh-huh.
I mean, they're honestly top 3, 4 best days in sports. Right here. NFL draft. Phenomenal. This is the start. This is the
Don't
start
nod your
of
head,
championship.
Jordan, the intern.
This is it right here. Thursday night starts championship season.
Stop that garbage. Did you
This
see
is
who the
it right here.
Who did the Patriots draft last year?
Somebody that's going to help them way down the line. Actually, they drafted multiple. One of the guys last year had 5 sacks this past season.
How many undrafted?
Dietrich Wiley.
How many undrafted guys do they have on their Super Bowl
That's because
roster?
they run an organization unlike any, and it was built through the draft. Where do you think they would be if they hadn't figured out to draft Tom Brady?
They would have the next guy.
No, they would. What about Garoppolo? Because of their draft, Garoppolo's paying dividends for the 49ers.
Yeah, how's that helping the Patriots?
Got them some draft picks. They got them draft
whole
picks. Tim.
second-round
They got
pick?
them draft picks.
That's a
Jacoby Brissett, draft picks.
Welcome into circular logic, people.
I'm just telling you, you look at this, it's a bad investment. It is to take a quarterback, the numbers are on my side here. When you just simply break it down and you look at quarterbacks in the first 15 picks, I'm not saying they're all bust. Because the word bust, like Sam Bradford, probably relatively compared to the contract.
Ugh.
Okay. But would you call Sam Bradford a bust? I wouldn't.
No. It's been a
But
starting
was he
quarterback.
in hindsight, was he worth the number 1 pick?
It's impossible.
The answer is no,
hypothetical.
Tim. It's a very simple no.
Because who else would they have taken? That's what you have to grade that against. Not against the best number 1 picks of all time. You have to grade it against who else would they have taken. And you don't have that information there.
Well,
with all research.
But again, that's dependent. That's dependent on what they need and who. Obviously, hindsight in this one, when you say that, is 50-50, because then I could just start scrolling down the list and saying, well, they should have taken the
He said it again. Did you even mean to say that? You
What?
didn't even mean to say hindsight.
Hindsight's easy. It's 50-50. No, in hindsight, yeah, it's easy to look back and say, well, they should have taken Ndamukong Suh. They should have taken Sue. That's who the Rams should have taken instead of.
The cliche is 20-20, my friend, not 50-50.
They should have taken Ndamukong Suh instead of Sam Bradford, right? We agree on that?
He would have been a better player.
There you go.
He's had a
All
better
right.
NFL career.
So let me give you. So here's what we got. And
also a bit of a locker room cancer and can't seem to stay with the same organization.
so you go back through. We wouldn't call Bradford a bust. I'm with you on that, but I also don't think he's worthy of the number 1 pick.
So you said the numbers backed you up. Give me some numbers.
So in 2011, top 15
That's
picks.
a year.
Cam Newton. That one's clearly good. That was a good one, right? How about Jake Locker?
Terrible pick.
Blaine Gabbert?
Awful.
Christian Ponder?
Brutal.
There you go. Okay, how about that? So the next year, let's move on. Andrew Luck has been good. I wouldn't put him in Cam Newton status. I wouldn't put him in Sam Bradford status either.
He's better than Sam Bradford, right?
Robert,
You're not saying he's worse than Sam
I
Bradford.
was saying I would put him slightly better than I'd put him
In
better than
between
Bradford,
Newton and
in
Bradford.
between Newton and Bradford. Robert Griffin III, I think, is an interesting case study because you got about a year and a half really
Right.
out of him.
If you don't go complete bust, it's pretty close.
Okay,
Right?
Ryan Tannehill's been,
Right.
I mean, again,
Not a bust. Been a starting quarterback in the league. Not great. Not terrible.
2013. How about E.J. Manuel?
Not good.
Mm-hmm.
But
Okay.
he's been a starting quarterback in the league and up until, a year and a half ago?
2014, Blake Bortles. Again, you'd be
But you're
saying
just picking out random one person?
no. I'm picking because in
top 15?
in 2013, matter of fact, Manuel was number 16.
So
Wasn't
they didn't
even-
even have one.
Yep.
So there was a reason for that.
2014, Blake Bortles. And again, if it wasn't for this year, we'd all be screaming Blake Bortles was a bust.
Right, except that this year happened.
2015, Jameis Winston.
Solid. How do you even go anywhere other than solid? He started from day one. He's made the Tampa Bay Bucks halfway relevant. How do you go with anything other than that?
I hadn't really seen him in the playoffs or anything. I mean, when you say halfway relevant, I guess because of his name, because of what he did in college, he's an intriguing character to continue to follow in the NFL. But
when you're a starting quarterback consistently in the NFL, if you're that makes you immediately, in my opinion, a draft pick that was worth it. You disagree. You have different criteria here. What's your criteria?
A draft pick that was worth it?
Yes.
At number one? I mean, you're right. Okay. I guess my point.
He's a franchise quarterback, right? He is the Tampa Bay Bucks.
I think it's way too. I think it's way too early to say that. I think it's way too early. Jameis Winston this past year's numbers: 19 touchdowns, 11 interceptions, 3,500 yards, 63% completion percentage.
Pretty good. Not great.
Not great. Not bad. I'm with you, and that's kind of my point on that. So, to me, when you look at the number one, you've got a top 5 pick, and the Browns have got 2 of them. You got to draft the best players. Now, again, my point with the Browns is there an absolute no-brainer 5-time Pro Bowl quarterback on there? I feel like every once in a while you get that. I do feel like Andrew Luck is one of the guys that I would have said, yes, I really, really like that guy. I'm going to take him. And I don't think he's necessarily lived up to maybe what I would expect. But again, he's not been bad either.
Mm-hmm. Wasn't Deshaun Watson that guy?
For me or for the pundits? Because, again, everybody dropped him for a lot of reasons.
Clearly not for the pundits, but in his I know it's a small sample size, and I get that Robert Griffin III was fantastic his rookie year as well, and then didn't do much after that. But I think we overanalyze this time of year, and this is what it becomes. You go to your tablet, you get out the numbers, you talk to investigators, and it becomes a ridiculous process where it's paralysis by analysis to a large degree.
But and that goes back to one of the best lines I think we've had on this program in the almost 2 years we've done it with Hayden Hurst. When you read Hayden Hurst's draft stuff to him, or what was it, the bad? I forget what it was. You read
you got strengths and weaknesses on your NFL.
Okay, what it was, and he said, just turn on the tape.
Right.
Just turn on. And I do agree with that. I think that at times NFL franchises tend to overthink what they're doing. But I still, when you're talking one of the top 10, one of the top 15 picks, to me, it's just not more. I think it's more prudent to take the best player available. And I'm not sure in terms of the best, what your position of need is most, if that makes sense. That's what I would do with the draft. Best player to me, again, for the Browns would be, a Saquon Barkley. And I'd even consider, I know this sounds crazy, but I would even consider a Bradley Chubb. I don't think Bradley Chubb's worth a number 1 pick, mind you. Maybe you trade that number 1 pick, or you take Saquon Barkley. I think Bradley Chubb maybe at 4 makes more sense if you want to go with a Minkah Fitzpatrick and upgrade your defensive back. I know people right now are going, why in the world are they talking Browns draft? But also it's just something that you've got coming up here this coming week with the NFL draft and where guys fall, and again how it can alter the course of a franchise.
No, it's Thursday night, and Hayden Hurst hoping or expecting. I don't even know. I feel like it might be overselling it to say expecting, or expected around the NFL to be the number 1 overall pick, because you never quite know the value of the tight ends, especially when you're looking at a class. This year is really quarterback heavy, and 5 guys expected to go in the first round. That would be tied for the second most ever. In 1983, there were 6 guys taken in the first round of the draft from a quarterback perspective. I'm more interested in those 5 guys and what we've seen so far, and now what that means moving forward. You got one guy who we basically see none of, and Josh Allen, right? And if you're trying to tell me otherwise and you're doing your own draft study and the whole thing, great. And you're not getting paid for it, you're wasting your time. You got the rest of those guys have kind of had wildly uneven careers. Lamar Jackson has been the most consistently dynamic one, right? Baker Mayfield right behind him. And then you got the West Coast guys who have been good, but Josh Rosen has clearly played on UCLA teams that have underachieved. And you could even say the same for Sam Darnold, I think, because Southern Cal, a lot was expected out of him, and they never got to the national championship-type contending seasons with him running the show. But how much stock do you put in them moving forward? So that's the really intriguing part to me of this NFL draft, and Thursday night particularly, because you're going to get all this quarterback drama. We saw it last year. Last year's draft was fantastic, right? You had people moving up. You had all kind of drama going down. You had the Deshaun Watson local angle here in the state of South Carolina. You had Pat Mahomes taken in front of him and him dropping down the list and the whole thing. I'm guessing we're going to get something similar on Thursday night. At least I'm hoping for some sort of similar type deal. I like the draft. Don't get me wrong. I just think we put a little bit too much emphasis on it. And when it compares to actual games, come on, man. There's no comparison. Actual games, much different than names on a board and guys going up and giving the bro hugs to Roger Goodell.
The only thing I'll say about that is, like, I think at times we can get caught up in actual games, and you can look at a guy like Johnny Manziel and what he did in a game and try and figure out if that translates to the NFL. I think that's the question with a guy like a Lamar Jackson, who's a different kind of quarterback than, say, a Baker Mayfield. Lamar Jackson is a dual-threat quarterback. We saw how Russell Wilson was more of a dual threat at NC State and then to a lesser extent at Wisconsin. That wasn't necessarily their offense, but when he went to the NFL, he is a pocket passing quarterback first who can beat you with his legs. Robert Griffin III was a guy who was beating you with his legs who could also throw the ball. I think there was a difference there.
Well, Wilson's the only guy. He's the only guy in the NFL that does it with his legs consistently now. Right?
But that's not, when a play starts, he doesn't go.
Who else in turn? Cam, that's because the Panthers didn't have anybody who could run the ball.
He's got a point. You're right. The intern's right. Cam Newton beats you with his legs.
They had to get rid of Jonathan Stewart because he 40 years old?
He is right.
Oh, he has to do it all.
I'm with the intern on this.
All right.
We're draft guys.
Yeah, you guys. But the Joe Lenardi's of the NFL draft sitting in with me this morning.
I think you mean Mel Kiper and Todd McShay over here.
Okay.
Intern and I, man, we're ready for this. I'm with it, man. One of the best days of the year. You get fired up on Thursday night, maybe do a little cookout. Get a couple TVs set up so you can really be keeping up with both the NFL Network and what's going on ESPN, and get all the analysts really going back and forth. It's a good time.
For the master of the gas baggy hot take, this should not be a surprise to me. I don't know why.
But, wow.
I would think otherwise.
Just a whole other level there, you know? Like,
here's how I envision Bill looking at a mirror after he has his mock draft and he writes it and he gets the first pick right.
You're a neat guy.
Give him the old.
But am I saying that to myself, or am I saying that to
in the mirror? Yeah,
in the mirror to yourself.
I was looking to see if I still had my. Yeah, if you go to my Twitter page, that big profile picture, not the one of me in the scarf. That's the NFL draft, man. I was watching it out on the lake a couple years ago. It's a good time.
I'm with you though on number one overall. If you don't pick Saquon Barkley number one overall, I don't know what you're doing, man. To me, he's a generational type player. Interested in hearing some of your thoughts about how this thing's going to go on Thursday night. Daryl is up first in this segment on the Love Chevrolet phone lines, 803-404-6100. Good morning, Daryl.
Morning, fellas. How y'all doing?
Doing good, man. What do you think Cleveland's should do?
I disagree on the Barkley pick, just because I don't think he's generational. I think he's really good, but I think as far as his overall production might go, there's some guys that may be close enough to him to where they don't have to go with the running back and with the first pick. And the history of the draft has proven you can get great backs in the second and third round, fourth round even. So I would not go with him with the first pick. What I would do is a little unconventional, but I did hear you mention it. I would go with Chubb. You get Chubb with the first pick. Mm-hmm. Then you have Garrett and Chubb. Mm-hmm. You got two awesome brush ends, and you know everybody, you got to get to the quarterback. Mm-hmm. You got those two guys for the next 10, 12 years, wreaking havoc on each end. I wouldn't go with a quarterback first because the quarterback, there's no dominant quarterback. Like neither one of these guys are standing out from the other. And all I do is listen to sports radio all day long, get back home and watch more sports. And I've heard 100 opinions. And all of them, when it comes to the quarterback, are different. So if all of the experts, so-called experts, they can't agree on who's the number one guy, then there's no need to press at number one to go with the quarterback. You can get that quarterback with your second pick of the top five. Then with that third pick in the first round, I would go with the best corner available or the best offensive lineman available. That's my opinion. That's what I do on that with those picks.
Thank you, Daryl. Appreciate the phone call. I think that's the safe way out. I get where he's coming from. He's using logic and reason and some past history. But the thing is, it doesn't matter what the experts' opinions are about these quarterbacks. It matters who's going to be the guy. Like, if you can go back and do your 50-50 hindsight, Bill, how many franchises should have taken Aaron Rodgers that let him slide down through the first round for whatever reason? He was too cocky or is too cerebral or whatever, however way you want to justify it, man. But I like what we saw last year, especially from the Chiefs moving all the way up, getting Mahomes and kind of going. I felt like they went outside the box a little bit. They had their guy identified. Andy Reid said, yeah, I want this guy. And that's what I think you got to do. You have to choose, if you're the Cleveland Browns, which one of these quarterbacks is your guy, assuming they think one of the five is a franchise-type quarterback. If they don't, then obviously the very conservative play is to do what Daryl just told us. I feel like that's what the Houston Texans did with Jadeveon Clowney, right? Line him up with J.J. Watt, and you got a tremendous defense to base around for years to come. Now, the problem is when you get Deshaun Watson, he's obviously a great quarterback, but he gets hurt and you don't have one behind him. And then you can't have a good team. And the Browns have been awful forever. They have to figure it out at quarterback. Number one, I feel like they have already done this slide thing. They did that with Deshaun Kaiser last year, right?
Say what you want. They brought in Tyrod Taylor.
He's going to be their guy?
He's as good as anybody else. And here's what I like about Tyrod.
Good as anybody
Here's
else.
what else I like about Tyrod Taylor. He has NFL experience right now. He's played in NFL games. He has the experience, and he was successful for the Buffalo Bills. Who got the Buffalo Bills to the playoffs last year?
The success?
Well, you realize Tyrod Taylor got the Bills to the playoffs last year, right?
They did make the playoffs for the first time in forever.
Okay, and now guess who's quarterbacking the Browns now? Tyrod Taylor. And he's got Jarvis Landry. I guess you go with Josh Gordon on the other side, but
absolutely.
Okay.
No, it's a good situation, I think, for a quarterback to come into. You got a relatively seasoned guy there. He's not spectacular, and as soon as he doesn't play well, I understand people are going to clamor for the high draft pick to get in there. So I think as opposed to years past, this is the best situation for a quarterback to come into at Cleveland. I mean, that's an awfully low bar. Let's go out to Dan on the Love Chevrolet phone lines. Dan is up next. Good morning, sir.
Hey, good morning, guys. How are you?
Doing good, man. You?
Hey, I'm doing real well. I do want to start off by saying you started off the hour by saying sports is like a big toy store. And I agree with Bill on this one because, you can find all kinds of stuff in the toy store, and it's all perfect entertainment. And there's a lot of mindless entertainment like crayons, but there's also other types of entertainment like board games and Dungeons and Dragons that you got to put a lot of thought into, roll the dice, and you still might get it wrong. Just like guys who play fantasy football, they do a lot of work, and it may turn out well or it may not. Same thing with Bill in the draft. I don't particularly follow it statistically, but why not? It's fun, It's just part of the game. Same thing when we argue who are the best players in baseball. What do? We grab all the statistics, and we have a good time with it. But it's all fun. It's all just entertainment. Hopefully people don't take it too seriously. So, anyway, that's my take on it. And if I was a quarterback, I'd want to go anywhere but Cleveland. That's about it.
No doubt about that, Dan. It's impressive taking our toy department analogy to the next step.
Really broke down. I like that.
The problem is when the fun gets sucked out of it, in my opinion.
This is fun.
When you get so serious, I guess I can see.
Intern and I are having a fantastic time this morning.
All right. I just think you guys might get a little delusional in your head. You think you're an actual GM of a team.
We have an hour and 15 minutes, Jordan. We can come up with a mock draft in the first round. And start working on that?
Imagine what he could do with crayons.
That's a good point.
2 mock drafts.
Well, there'd be a lot of scratching out. And
one in red and one in blue.
We'll continue our discussion with you on the NFL draft as we roll on this morning. Again, 803-404-6100, the number into the program. I still need to name one quarterback who you're going to go with. I don't know who I would go with.
I told you Rosen.
I know you went with Rosen. I want to say Darnold right now, but in the back of my head, Lamar Jackson keeps popping up, and Baker Mayfield too. I still think he's going to be a good NFL quarterback. Those other guys, I don't know. And the fact that Darnold didn't win at Southern Cal with everything he had around him and the situation they have playing in the Pac-12, it makes me question that. And I'm guessing NFL franchises are going through this process as well. I think the silly thing they might do at this point is having identified a guy and then ruled out the other guys. Then what happens in this thing? Because I think we're going to see some trades. We're going to see some movement all over the place. If your guy's gone, then what do you do? If you don't have you got to have plan B, plan C, plan D. Now that's if you're an actual NFL front office person, as opposed to someone who's coming up with a mock draft and crayon here soon.
Going to do it in that white crayon too, on white paper, so that it always is correct.
Perfect.